before recess, so have a nice recess and enjoy your holidays. We've some important business this morning, and because of the nature of that business, there are a number of officers hopefully are going to be present to answer any members' questions. Can I have sorry, just before we go on, this is Tom Everett, is shadowing Gavin, is the head boy at Langham, and is going to take the next meeting of the full council instead of Gavin. So, okay. Can I have the Sederunt and apologies, please?
Thank you, Leader. Morning, members. 15 members present. I have 4 apologies from Councillors Collins, Diggle, Ogilvie and Smith. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks. Any others? No?
Again, Chair, not so much an apology. I've got a meeting in Stranraer at 2 o'clock, so I'll maybe leaving just the back of 12.
Okay, any declarations of interest? No? Can I turn to item 3, which is the meeting of the 18th of June. I'm happy to move.
Happy second.
Okay, if we can move on to item 4. This is the Chief Executive Service Final Outturn Report for 2013-14. It sets out the financial position of the Chief Executive Service at the end of 2013-14 and provides an update on the savings achieved as against budget. Whilst there had to be some alignment between the budget heads, I'm pleased to note that the Chief Executive Service has balanced its budget. There have been some challenges, particularly with regard to managing staff savings because of the timing of early retirements. However, members will have noticed that compensating efficiency savings were made, and the full year effect of staff savings will ensure that 2013-14 requirement is addressed on an ongoing basis. It's accepted that there will need to be further savings on staff in the current financial year, and these will require to be closely monitored and managed. Appendix 3 to the report sets out spending on the policy development allocations for modern apprentices and graduate employment, and I'm pleased to say it presents a very positive picture. I will now open up the debate to members. Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, Leader. Good to know, in fact, that we have, got such a good turnout. But I would have to be honest and say, sir, not for the first time. Paragraph 3.5. It's under the specific heading in this occasion, Leader, of business solutions. During the year, there was a number of temporary staff vacancies that resulted in a service underspend of £80,000. Now, any savings, given our current situations, are welcome. But my implicit worry in that type of situation, under the heading of vacancy management, is that the more we use this as a tool, and in certain circumstances I accept, sir, it can be regarded as a legitimate tool, but the more we use this as a tool, inevitably the more pressure, the more stress we put our remaining members of staff under. And it was interesting, to my view at least, that no less than the Audit Commission comparatively recently commented on the fact that local authorities have got to get away from the concept of cutting out, staff, as it were, with a view to making savings and achieving targets. So, as I say, delighted at the outcome, but that's one area, Leader, that I personally have a certain degree of reservation about.
Okay, I'll give a comment.
The savings the vacancies there, we do vacancy manage. The vacancies there are now being filled. The situation was that this was a planned process. We were looking at the staffing levels overall in BTS just to see where we were and how we would take the matter forward. I do accept what Councillor Geddes is saying, however, and we do manage vacancies as best we possibly can. It's an inevitable fact that we will require to downsize.
Thanks, Chair. It's just 2 points, Chair, page 11 or 248, and it's on non-school property rationalisation, recognising that some properties have still to be vacated, and that's the case in Stranraer, and is how we use those, or how we could use those property. properties, but it's to a report that was requested on the dilapidation, and I did raise it at CCS, and I think it was referred to that we are awaiting that report, and it'll come to policy and resources. So it's really to ask on that, just to see what indeed the savings that were marked against that, whether indeed that has been achieved and how it's been achieved, and indeed if it has been. My next point is on page 12, Chair, and like you, I note the success of the modern apprenticeship scheme. But it's really to look at that in terms of young people leaving school at 18 that may have, or who have, a profound disability and learning difficulties, in recognising that they also could benefit from a modern apprenticeship scheme. And indeed, there is a project being developed in Stranraer through the ARC, and I would like to think that as an authority, we would see some of that monies being directed to those that are not so fortunate and not so well off, that we can see that and look for that development alongside the gardening project in Stranraer, so that we don't forget that there are people that are not so well off, and that we can direct some of that funding towards them, and they can go on and gain qualifications, as I have seen on TV, etc.
Go on.
I'll deal with Councillor Scobie's second point. I think I totally agree with Councillor Scobie that one of the things that's coming forward for member consideration after the recess is a revised children's services strategy. Within that strategy, one of the care themes will be for our most vulnerable children and those in care, and developing definitive pathways for them as they leave care and also as they leave school for our most vulnerable. That will be then connected through to the revised employability strategy that will be coming forward. I fully accept I don't think we have done enough to create those pathways, but the strategy will clearly set out both the process and come back to members. I think we have the available budget. I think we just need to prioritise the use of it. So happy to engage with Councillor Scobie in advance of that paper coming forward.
Okay, Alex, do you want to...
In terms of Councillor Scobie's first question, sorry, yes, we've achieved 325,000 of the 375 we were hoping to achieve from the rationalisation. There are difficulties in emptying buildings. The report on dilapidations will come to the Policy and Resources Committee, sir. I don't know if Councillor Scobie's aware yet, but we're actually making moves in Stranraer. The buildings are made available for sale, but I can assure you if someone came along and said, I would like to lease that building from you, we would look at that very seriously. So we do make the buildings available for use by the community.
Okay, and just on the disability and learning challenges of the youngsters, when this came up at another committee, I did question why there wasn't as many people applying from certain areas, and I understood the challenges within that, and I completely agree that every aspect of it has to be looked at. Ivor first.
Chair, it's with regard to the modern apprenticeship scheme. I think what is evidence, it's been a successful scheme so far, and it was down to this MA Plus where we've actually got the additional year so that modern apprentices can go on and do a year's employment. I think it's been quite successful that we've actually seen people gaining employment prior to moving on to the third year, and I'm just wondering, will we still use the full 5 million over and above if we have extra money so that we can cover more than the 250 that were promised? Another one was with regard to the graduate employment scheme. It's been going well as well, and we notice there's been a slight underspend. It's been transferred to this year. Will we be using the full amount of the money this year and bringing everyone through?
Answer that, yes. On the modern apprentice scheme, yes, we will be taking it forward. We might be coming back to members. Part of our discussion with the Skills Development Scotland Board was in fact to make us attract one of the pilot sites for the advanced apprenticeship, which is a new qualification which is actually enabling some people with HNDs and HNCs to move into higher skilled employment with employers particularly directed at our region. So therefore, we may well be coming back with additional funding from the government that might need support from the council. The pilot scheme is underway within the college just now, but it's talking about a full-scale pilot across the public bodies to enable better pathways for our graduates from the college and universities to secure employment. So absolutely we'll go forward. It has been, to this point for us, very beneficial. Also, I think it's been beneficial by bringing young people back into teams with an older age group. It's re-energised a number of our teams. I think there's more we can do, and particularly I think in the area of DG First, in which we could do more for those with less academic qualifications to come in and give them career pathways. And I'm currently discussing that with the Assistant Chief Executive and the Director. On the graduate employment scheme, absolutely. We've had a significant increase in demand for high quality placements, and we will be looking to make those placements following the recess to get them fully in, and those are spread right across the 10 graduates right across our region this time, because I think members commented the last time there was nothing from the west. Certainly we have a couple of people from the west. I think now that have been applied, and we have projects available for them to undertake in their locality.
Okay, Jim.
Thanks, Chair. Appendix 2, in relation to non-schools property rationalisation. What is the current status of Brewery House, Newton Stewart?
My understanding is that Brewery House has been declared surplus to the Council's requirements. It's certainly on the list to go on the market, sir. It may be that there are still residual members of staff there because of the situation with the Macmillan Hall. As the Council is well aware, we're doing considerable amount of work on the Macmillan Hall, and the Macmillan Hall is being used, the Brewery House is being used for residual staff during those works. But my understanding is it has been declared surplus by the Council and will go on the market in due course.
Thank you.
Okay, Ian.
Thanks, Larry. Just a brief comment in regards to the ALTSO recommendations. Happy to agree with them. I think it's appropriate we do, but just I don't think I've ever seen a balanced budget before. I think this is the first time I've seen a break even. I don't recall it. It's 7 years, certainly for myself, so you've got to be a congratulations there, and hopefully we can keep this up over the next year.
Okay, I wouldn't ask. I had to comment on that.
It's not creative accounting. I can assure members that we did balance the budget.
Okay, can we move to recommendations? Can we note 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3? Thank you. Moving on to item 5, which is the Chief Executive Service Budget for 2014-15. This report forms part of the Council budget process for 2015-16 and provides activity-based budget information which will be used to inform the budget process for 2015-16 and the two subsequent two years. The main issues facing the service as we go forward is the fact that staff costs account for 82% of the net controllable budget, and a further 9% is allocated to corporate fees and elected member charges. Savings therefore required to be found from a very small proportion of the budget, and this is one of the reasons why we agreed at the council meeting that we will be looking to restructure the council and undertake cross-cutting service reviews. I'm going to ask Alex if there's anything further to add to this report, and then I'll move to members' questions.
Thank you, Leader. No, I'm quite happy to take questions, Leader.
Members, Ian?
Just in regards to 2.1, I think maybe we should cover that in some. We should add to that at least in some aspects. 2.1 says that we should receive a presentation in regards to this activity-based budget information. So just maybe even a few words. We did get a few words at Community Customer Services, so it's explicit there. So maybe get a few words on it.
It does say that.
Yeah, I think the Leader's covered the main issues that I would want to cover. We have a budget there. There's considerable expenditure. It's 21 million, but there's very little of it that we can actually control. We've achieved savings measures across the pieces you've seen in the previous report. We will continue to do that, but I think what we're basically saying is there comes a stage, to go back to Councillor Geddes' point, when you can no longer keep shaving staff away. So what the Council has agreed to do is to look at an overall review of the Council as a whole in terms of the Chief Executive's report to the last meeting, and also to look at cross-service reviews. So I really have, if members want to go into the report in detail, the idea of providing you with the ABV book is to basically allow you to see what services are provided from within the Chief Executive service, and it's a very wide-ranging service. A lot of the work that we do is statutorily controlled, so we need to do it. I'm happy to take questions, Sir, rather than speak at you, if that's okay.
Okay, Ian.
Thanks, Leader. I suppose the first question I would pick up on it is not so much about the information contained within the report, but other than on page 15, there's an appendix where the proposed budget process was spoken at. I asked the same question at Community Customer Services earlier in the week. It's in regards to how the members will be involved, but it's probably as much for yourself as well, Leader. What's your feeling as we go forward over the next few months, how you'll involve the council, and I mean that as in members of the council, in regards to this process as outlined?
Just on the process here, it's, this was agreed by members on the 6th of February, and as I've said there, my door is open. I won't be speaking with everybody and anybody that wants to come and speak to me, and we'll go through it, and if there's issues, we'll be speaking about these issues. Alistair?
Thanks very much. So it's just going back to the issue, and let me make it clear, Leader, under no circumstances am I suggesting that we create work for our officials purely for the sake of doing so. But given the importance of this, and Mr. Hazel has already alluded to it, the fundamental impact that this will have, as it were, on the communities in Dumfries and Galloway, it might perhaps have been worthwhile in this particular instance to look at the possibility of some form of seminar-type presentation, followed by some form of decision-making in the back of it, Leader. As I say, and I'm not under any circumstances trying to slow the process up today, but I mean, as Mr. Stevenson said recently, and I think it was a pretty sobering thing to hear him say it, we're really going to have to take radical decisions and make radical choices as to what areas of activity as a local authority we may have to walk away from. And as I say, given that that will, as my understanding, Leader, that will affect basically most of the services of the council, that will have an extremely serious impact. And in these particular circumstances, and I stress particular, sir, it might have been no bad thing to look at that possibility. As I say, not wishing in the slightest, Leader, to create work for anyone.
Gavin?
I absolutely agree. I think there's two pieces of work. Obviously, there's the reshaping of the council piece of work, in which we agreed to the GRIPS, but also I think that actually the answer to the shape of this service is very much connected to the budget saving proposal and how we can do this smarter, more effectively across. So I'm happy to consider how we best shape that engagement with the members. It could well be a seminar, or it could well be an extension to the discussion to have with individual groups about the reshaping, to hear your views on where we could make it. A good example will be Business and Technology Solutions, responding to your first question, Councillor Geddes, that actually there are elements of that function elsewhere within the council. And therefore, some of the opportunities could be about, do we centralise it? Do we have a more devolved structure? But create the savings from looking at the totality of the skill set involved rather than the individuality, and that's the debate, and take that through. So what I'll do is following this meeting, I'll have a really good thing and get back to elected members with ideas of how we shape that. So if we're engaging in the shape, it'd be impossible not to engage upon the outputs and the outcomes that you want at the same time. So try and arrange longer sessions with individual groups and members before we pull it back together for a joint session. It could well be a seminar in advance of members' meeting.
Grateful to you for letting me back in, Leader. That's very helpful indeed, and I think that we should, sir, pursue that particularly. Probably the better alternative might be to operate within the parameters of groups in the first instance, and then look, depending on the outcome, at some form of plenary session thereafter. Thank you.
Thanks. Was this the same point, Jim, was it, or is it a different point? Okay. Jane?
Thanks. That's actually very largely covered the issue because this is a snapshot in a way, and we need to match up the proposals that we all agreed at full council with this. So I'm perfectly happy. Can we have some sort of idea? I mean, are you thinking about doing this, Leader, immediately we get back from recess, or what should we really be thinking? Because I think the Chief Executive was due to report in November. Maybe I've got that wrong, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I see this as work in progress, but having to be looked at again.
I think the Assistant Chief Executive is finalising the timetable, but yes, immediately on return from recess. It does not stop engagement with individual members or leaders during the recess if you're available to take initial ideas. But yes, immediately following recess and into September, so that therefore we're able to then have time to move towards a plenary session and pull the ideas together, particularly in the reshaping. So yes, we will be looking to get that in the diaries with the groups to fit in with your cycle. Obviously that would give us a chance to get round everybody, but it doesn't preclude, I mean, I'm around the entire recess, individual discussions with leaders or individual members if they wish them.
Okay, Sean.
Thanks. Just a couple of issues. The first one is on page 32. And that's on the organisational development and human resources. It's just a little bit more information on the line with regards to modern apprentices, a total of 15. It states in the comments that in addition, the cost of modern apprentice and graduate is funded through the policy development employed across the council and included within the services budget. So a couple of questions on that. Modern apprentices, does that include the graduate? And is that just the intake for this financial year? So just a little bit more clarity on that one. And the next one, I usually raise this one, it's page 54 of 248. It's just with regards to the number of freedom of information requests dealt with within 20 working days. I noticed that it was 89% in 2012, and in 2013 it's remained at 89%. I just wanted to ask Alec what the implications are for not actually getting the appropriate information out within the 20 working days, and why we've actually just stayed at the 89%.
Answer to question one, is the 15 are within Chief Executive Service only. There are modern apprentices across the council. We merely hold the budget for that because it was policy development budget given to the Chief Executive Service to develop the Modern Apprentice scheme, or the Modern Apprentice Plus scheme. So those 15 are actually within the Chief Executive Service. We've got some in the architects, etc., etc. In terms of the 89%, the law allows you to go more than the 20 days in terms of a particularly complex request for information. There are times when you get a request for information which requires an awful lot of input from officers. We do write to individuals and say the amount of information you have requested is quite considerable. We will get the information to you, but we cannot guarantee that we'll get it to you within the 28 days. Yeah, the 20 days. So that's how we work it, sir. But legally it's acceptable. I would like to see that figure higher, but it depends on the amount of information which an individual requests. Bearing in mind that we hold the information across the council, it's held in new technology, and we're required to make sure that we give anyone who asks it all the information they've asked for, because not to do so creates more work for the council.
Yes, I think that one of the challenges we've had is, I'll give you a good example where we've had a freedom of information request that's requested a copy of every single email to one individual officer, and therefore that could have come from any of our 8,200 staff, multiple emails. So therefore trying to work out the reason for it. So therefore the first thing you do there, because it's going to be an enormous task, is you have to then contact the individual to clarify what it is they're looking for. So therefore that normally would take us over the 20 days. Other has been that as we've got into the stages of issuing fees and charges, the council tax, we've had an enormous amount of people under freedom of information requesting a range of information. So we do endeavour to deal with it, but the real target is we need to notify them if we're going over the 20 days. But I would say the last one, we're probably talking about in advance of 10,000 individual pieces of information which of course we've got a small team to try and deal with it. So that's been our challenge in moving it forward. But for members' information, at the end of every year, the Information Commissioner does publish an annual report that will be reported back to committee for scrutiny, so our performance against the rest of Scotland can be seen. But we've been hit in the last 2 to 3 weeks with some enormous freedom of information requests.
But I can just come back on the first point. It's maybe just, is the narrative not a little bit misleading on that? Because with regards to modern apprentices and graduates, it says that funded through policy development and employed across the council are included within the services budget. That seems to suggest that all the modern apprentices are actually held within this part of the service.
That was not the intention, sir, but I'm happy to look at the wording and amend the wording accordingly.
John?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I've brought this up before regarding FOIs. As Mr Haswell says, yes, it is allowable within the legislation to take more than the 20 days. But what we can't figure out from the figures that's there are which ones of the ones that aren't being allowed for within the 20 days fall within the extended period and what ones just didn't make the 20 days. There's two different figures there. One is within the extended period that's allowed by the legislation and some that will not be replied to within the 20 days. It's those that aren't replied to within the 20 days that will give us a problem with the Commissioner. On the other points I brought up at a previous committee regarding comparator authorities, and I notice in this ABB we have the same thing. On page 23 we have accountancy cost per 1,000 spent. We have the 9 comparator authorities, and then at the bottom of the page we have just about all the Highlands and Islands authorities. Are they part of the 9? Which ones are part of the 9? Again, throughout the ABB we seem to be using the Highlands and Islands authorities to compare until you get to page 53, when we are looking at benchmarking with 26 large authorities that include Cumbria, Aberdeenshire, Fife and East Lothian. Are they within the 9 comparative authorities? If we're comparing authorities in an EBB or in anything, surely we should be using the same comparative authorities for everyone. On page 29, I noticed the rise in the laptop prices from last year and the excuse that it was for Windows 7. Elected members have been actually using Windows 7 since we got elected the last time. I see Councillor Scobie, I did actually check it. We are on Windows 7, so I questioned the over £100, well, it's £132 rise in the cost of a laptop within the last year. And on page 84, regarding the versions of electoral register, the strange thing that struck me there is why data versions are actually dearer than hard copy. I thought one of the savings on computerising everything was that data was cheaper than hard copy.
I'll cover as much as I can. The comparator authorities are not chosen by us. They're prescribed by, I think it's SIPFA. So we don't have an opportunity to say we don't think that's a comparative authority. We're told which the comparative authorities are for benchmarking. So that's not within our control. The reason for the difference is I don't exactly know, but I'll come back to the councillor on it. I'm going to ask Graham to answer the question about the price of laptops. The cost of the data registers, I think there are different types of register. I think there's one of them which is a restricted register and one of them which is not restricted. But I could come back to Jim with an answer to that as well. I don't have that detail with me today. Graham.
Okay. There are 2 main reasons for the increase in cost. One is the laptops are now of a higher specification than they were previously, and that's to future-proof them for the next 5 years. And the second one is the laptop design itself, the model itself, is much lighter and robust, so we can introduce agile working in a much better way. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Jeff.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of queries on page 20 under Exchequer Services. It refers to an additional elections payroll becoming live. What's the elections payroll and why is there now a need for whatever it is? And the second one is just a minor point. On page 24, the text refers to the indicator improving, whereas the graph shows it's not improving. So one of those two is wrong as far as I can see.
In terms of the elections issue, sir, it's been a bone of contention with returning officers across Scotland. HMRC have introduced rule-time tax payments. In the past, if you worked at the election, you were paid by cheque, and the tax was deducted and paid to the taxman at the end of the year. I am now required as returning officer, because I employ all these people, to pay the tax within 28 days. That means I need a computerised system to ensure that I get the tax deducted, I pay the staff through the electronic system, and the tax goes to the taxman after 20 or within 28 days. Otherwise, I incur a penalty of £10,000. So I'm afraid that's why I incurred the expenditure, sir. In terms of the graph, page 24. Which one, Councillor Lever, please?
The Dumfries and Galloway figure shows it going down the percentage, whereas the text says it's improved.
There, that one. I don't have an instant answer for that. I'll check that for you, sir. The information is it has improved. I think the graph's probably wrong.
Jill?
Thank you, Leader. It's on page 55. Under expenditure costs, it says salaries, teachers with an income of 542634. Can you explain that to me, please? I don't see it in the papers anywhere, so that was just an explanation for it. Page 55, under expenditure, the salaries, teachers, what, and it's money coming in. I'm presuming it's money coming in because it's in brackets. Just seems a bit strange. I mean, what is it? Why have we got teachers under this, and what is it? Because it looks like money coming in to me, but it doesn't appear in income.
It's the money released by Teacher Refresh.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jim? No. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I share Councillor Lever's confusion over the wording on page 24, because it is clear from the table at the bottom of page 23 that our record of Timaeus payment has actually marginally declined. There are reasons given on page 24, but the wording most certainly is confusing.
It is wrong, sir. I'll change it.
Perhaps, given the fact that it is declining, that I would ask that perhaps members are given a note on the actions being taken by Mr Garrett to improve our performance for the next year. I know it's covered later in the performance report, but given the fact that this does show a decline in performance marked against it, I'll ask for a specific note to be put round from Mr Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Page 55 again, and it's in the supplies, services and admin costs. We're spending nearly £250,000 on printing, and we've just had a brief update on laptop efficiency, and we've spent a fortune in this hall putting sockets and plugs and various other things in, and I do think that it's incumbent upon us to try and start to move to become a bit more electronically able, particularly within the chamber, and I personally would be very happy to opt out of getting all of this paper for every single committee I sit on and bring my laptop with me. And I'd just like to make that point that I think with £250,000 being spent on printing, it's a saving that could be easily made if members were just a bit more computer savvy. Not for all, because I know that all don't have laptops, but for those who want to opt out of paper, maybe it's the time that we did.
We are moving towards digital first, and we will be coming around the groups to speak with them about members and papers, etc., etc. I think we're scheduled to do that in September.
Alistair?
thanks very much, sir. If you'd entertain a comment from a Luddite on behalf of a fellow Luddite. If we go electronically, what is Jim McClung and I going to write our comments on?
That boat as well.
So am I, so I'm halfway there, and it was 50-50. Just in regards to the recommendations, we move on. I mean, I think halfway the information that's there, and you've given us an assurance, leader, that you'll have an open door approach, and the Chief Executive's given an assurance that if we want to kick off our budget process as groups or individuals as we go forward, we can do that as of straight away. So I'm certainly happy with the recommendations that are there.
Don't know who's first, is it either Joe? Either?
I think it's the same point. Can you just clarify me the mechanism of why we are reporting the teachers' salaries in this budget for teacher refresh and not in the education budget?
It's a corporate savings, sir. We're paying for, the council is paying for that corporately, and the savings are being brought in to the corporate centre, if that's not the wrong terminology.
Are you okay with that? Either.
Why isn't it in the corporate budget rather than in business management within the Chief Executive Service? It's just, why is it in that actual heading?
It's the accountancy way of doing it, sir. I can only say that's the way the budget has been presented by our finance colleagues.
We'll get an answer back to you. Paul isn't here at the moment. John?
It's the same point, so if we can get an answer, that would be good. Thanks.
Okay, if we can move to the recommendations, we've received a very short presentation by Alex. And 2.2, can we agree the service budget is detailed on pages 2? Okay, thank you. Move on to item 6, which is the early year assessment of the business plan performance report by the Director Chief Executive Service. This is the annual report of performance of the Chief Executive Service. All members have the colour-coded copy at the end of the year summary. Take it by their silence they have. You will see from the report that the Chief Executive Service has 22 KPIs and is responsible for the 13 council-wide indicators. They also report on 23 projects. Alex Haswell has already expressed his concerns to me, which I share, regarding the fact that 9 indicators have not met their targets, and at Appendix 2 we have been provided with exception reports for each of these 9 indicators, setting out why the targets have not been achieved, and provided members with details of the management action which is being taken to address these issues. I'm going to open this up to members to ask any questions in the report, and either Alex or a member of his team will respond. Members? John?
I suppose I better be consistent. I brought it up at the EEI report. There are several of the projects that they give a start date, give an end date, and then give a percentage of progress. When you look at some of them, I question whether they're actually progressing at a proper pace. Page 94, implementation of quality duties. It's a 24-month project. It's good. We're 15 months in, and it's only 20% complete. And on page 95, the bottom box, the top 2, one's a 24-month project. We're only 7.5 months left. It's only 37% done. And promoting the use of PCOS and other electronic processes, it's a 12-month project. We've got 3.5 months left, yet it's only 20% progressed. It might be handy in cases like that for an explanation to be in the body of the report of why it looks, and I emphasise that looks, as if the progress isn't as what you would expect given the time period that's left.
Perhaps for members' clarity, and thank you for bringing that to my attention, that each of the projects has key stages within it. So perhaps the indicator should be the achievement of key stages. So therefore, if perhaps you're only 20% in, but that's the stage you're expected to be at, that would then allow that to be set. So therefore, if you've missed the key stage, it would generate an exception report to come to members as to why we got there. So if members are content, I'll ask Alec to amend that to have perhaps a key stage indicator put in, so then that would automatically bring a more detailed report to members' consideration for scrutiny.
Okay. Ira.
Chair, it's with relation to the sort of absence levels, and I think in a later paper, because I can't find it in this one just now, there's reference to stress surveys and various other reasons why people are going off, and stress seems to be one of the sort of highest causes for long term, and that seems to be one of the issues with regard to the level of absence. I was just wondering, are we putting in place stress action plans to allow people to return? Because in the next paper, and I may be reading it wrong, one of the pages has on it, page 140, that we will implement the stress action plans. I may be getting, I don't know if that's a corporate one compared to an individual one, and it's something maybe you could clarify for me.
Paul?
Chair, there are stress action plans being produced and at various stages within services. We produced a number of these towards the end of last year, and they are gradually progressing towards the actions within the plans being achieved. So those are being reported back through service committees as well, just to give feedback in terms of what each service is doing. So the answer to that is broadly yes. Stress is a problem. It's a problem across all employers. We have a stress survey we carried out last year, produced action plans on the back of that, and they are reported back through the Health and Safety Subcommittee in terms of progress on that too, as members will be aware.
Ivor Bottomwalking. Yep.
I thought we'd done away with the Health and Safety Subcommittee, or is that the employers, the joint one? The other one was, are these directorate stress action plans, or are these individual ones for employees if they're coming back into their position?
These are actually the stress action plans produced by departments.
Do you have the same point?
Well, it is to do with the stress action plans, because my understanding is that we have a policy in place that if somebody's off with stress, when they come back to work, we have a duty as an employer to have a stress action plan in place. And if that is the case, how many stress action plans does the council currently have in place? Because everybody who's been off with stress for whatever length of time, when they come back, should have a stress action plan in place. What are the how many? Because we've just talked earlier on in the reports that we've been through this morning about some posts not being filled, although they're, we're looking at filling them now, and if that's causing additional stress on the workforce. So I just want to be clear how many we've got in place, because obviously for anybody who's been off sick with stress, we should have one.
I don't have an absolute figure on how many we have, but it's an integral part of the response to anyone who has been off stress to have an individual action plan, and also when we're supporting services and maximising attendance, we are actually working towards the individual departmental and drilling down to data at a group, occupational and individual level to respond to the nature of and cause of stress within departments, and we provide support to managers to actually address that as part of our corporate responsibility.
Just very briefly, stress is a huge issue for people in the workforces across the country, and I would like to know, I'll be able to find out how many stress action plans the council has in place. I think it's important that we know that.
I'm sure we could actually look at what data we can provide to councillors on that.
Can I ask for that then, Leader, please, for that to come back to us, because I think it's important that members find that information.
Absolutely. Well, it's the same point.
Same point, Chair, and indeed to the points being made by Jill and the earlier points made by Alistair, it's not only those that are off with stress, but it's the effect that has on the remaining staff. and I've asked for that report at Social Work Committee and raised it at the Health and Safety Subcommittee. So I think we do need a report on this, because the targets, as I recall, the target was some 3%, with social work running at 15%, which is well out with the target in terms of stress-related illness, etc., etc. So we do need a comprehensive report, and I would hope that that would come to the various committees and policy and resources as the overarching body, just to see what performance we are. Not only to those that are off with stress and their return, but the impact and effect that has on remaining staff and how they are coping as well with workload, etc. So I would ask that we do have that report, particularly to social work, health and safety sub, and here as the overarching committee.
I'm Ring Alec, and I don't know how difficult it would be to judge the stress impact and people that are at work and how they're dealing with it. I don't know. I mean, yeah, we could have a survey, I suppose, but surveys mean that it all depends on the question that's asked. I'll let you first and then let you back in, Molly.
Thanks, Chairman. There's a fairly comprehensive report at item 11 on the attendance management, and it does touch on stress. It's not the Health and Safety Subcommittee, by the way. It's a joint trade union meeting that takes place. The stress survey results, there was a stress survey undertaken last year, and those stress survey results have been reported back to that committee and are also included in monitoring reports that come before members. I think Paul maybe could give us a bit more detail, Leader, if that was acceptable to you.
I think Councillor Scobie and Councillor make very good points in terms of the impact that stress has, and I think at the forefront is not only the impact it has on the individuals who are off, but on those who remain and have to carry the workload in some cases while they're fit to return. It's one of the areas that we're focusing on, and interestingly, I've actually had a copy of the inquiry from Councillor Scobie, and looking at the outcome in terms of overall absence management within social work services, they have in fact improved by 3.5% overall, but that's not to say that stress does not remain a problem, and we will be using support of the business improvement team over the next year to actually support managers better in a number of areas where that's having a big impact on the staff or service delivery. So we're committed to doing that, as we have been supporting them for a number of years now through the maximising attendance policy.
Okay, well,
yeah, I take the point you make, Chair, in terms of not just doing a survey for a survey's sake. And I think, and rather than being abstract, I think my analogy is that some years ago, for those of us that can recall, then I think the report to the Social Work Committee and from experts in the field was that our social workers were running with something like 100 caseload, and the optimum figure was 40. And we managed to get it down to 60 or thereabouts. And it's just an illustration, an example in terms of, the impact on members of staff that are left. And if we take that as an example, the figures could be running on anything above 60 plus cases. And that then has, again, an impact on the people who are receiving the service as to the quality of service and quantity as well. So in that respect, it's not just a survey for survey's sake, but I believe there are ways that we can analyse and come back with that analytical report, and that was the reason for requesting. I just recall making that inquiry of Paul, so I'm grateful for that, but I think there are ways. And I would hope, well, I'm asking that goes back to the three committees I've just referred to.
Chairman, yeah, we'll come back to the councillors on that. Could I just remind members, because we use the term stress, it doesn't mean to say it's all work related. There are many causes of stress, So we do have people who are off with stress who will, when they come back to work or when they visit OC Health, will say, I'm going through a divorce. It has nothing to do with my work. So that kind of statistic might be helpful for members, and that would come out in the individual stress plan.
Okay, Jen, you've been waiting patiently.
Two things, please, Leader. The first thing is about, I do applaud the idea of the e-procurement and PCOS being more, should we say, enforced. I don't know. The wording is the time has come to mandate the use of PCOS. I'm quite intrigued as to what happens if somebody doesn't take up that invitation. I presume that that will be the case, that people will be asked and will be... no, I don't think so. I won't repeat that. I think that's actually quite important, because certainly the Scrutiny Committee has done quite a bit on work on that. So I think I'd like to know what's being proposed here so that it links up with what the Scrutiny Committee has thought. And the other part of it is the Socketim issue, which is to do with Dumfries and Galloway's website. I'm very happy to have that being refreshed. I think it's extremely clunky with respect to a search in it. You cannot go into that website and simply search easily for policies. If a member of the public wants to know about policies not to do with planning, because planning is, I think, quite clear, but generally speaking, it's very difficult to manoeuvre around. And I would like information about how we're going to tackle that with respect to the community being involved in that. And the second issue is, I think it would be very useful if that particular website had perhaps a list of briefings. Members are given briefings on particular items of interest. One of the things that comes up regularly is, in fact, the use of PCOS. Why is it that the council insists on this being used, whereas it would be much cheaper to go and buy? And then you have to trot out the whole business about how much it costs to process an invoice, etc., etc. If that was just up there, easily accessible, the member of the public would be able to know that.
Okay, Lizzie, can you...
Thank you, Chair. Both corporate procurement and finance are keen for the increased use of e-procurement across the council, including PCOS. A reason is if more services can be persuaded to use PCOS, then this will have an immediate benefit through efficiency savings, as council will gain through increased purchasing muscle to negotiate more advantageous contracts with suppliers, and ultimately saving the council money. And it will also allow us to produce more effective procurement strategies and to help develop those. You'll see from the report that both corporate procurement and finance tried what we use the term moral persuasion to get services to make more use of PCOS, but unfortunately this strategy only had very limited success. Therefore, to address this, both procurement and finance took a report to the Corporate Business Support Group, and there was agreement for a council-wide adoption of PCOS, or a department equivalent such as Framework I, with a target date of implementation being the 1st of April 2015. However, for this plan to work, we need to know what services or why services have been resistant using PCOS or e-procurement in the past. And to this end, I'm pleased to report that Finance has successfully recruited a graduate through the Council's Graduate Experience Employment Programme. Part of the graduate's project is to examine possible organisational, technological and cultural factors inhibiting the use of PCOS for services. And through this, it's hoped that we can put right any shortfalls and ensure that the adoption of e-procurement is a success. We really want member backing for this. And this is in a sense the mandatory aspect. You'll see from the report we're going to write it up into the financial codes, but we really need to make sure that services come on board this sort of initiative, because I think it's in the council's best interest. Thank you.
Okay, website, clunky, relevant info and briefings maybe, and what are we going to do about it?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can reassure Councillor Maitland that we agree 100% with what she says, and that there is a piece of work, in fact it will come up in the next item in the Chief Exec's new business plan, to improve our digital services. And what that really does, it engages with our system provider to do a full engagement, both with members, communities, officers, our customers, to identify how that website needs to be redeveloped to meet their needs. Thank you.
Okay, Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, Leader. I would like to return, if I may, sir, to your introductory remarks, and let me say in passing that I would commend you for your candour, because, quite frankly, parts of this report, unfortunately, don't make good reading. Now, obviously, Leader, particularly in Appendix 2 in the exception reports, there are various improvement action plans set out and proposed. My question would be, sir, while we hope that, obviously, that these will be successful, what arrangements are in place, in fact, to review, particularly from an expedited point of view, what we need to do, in fact, if it's becoming apparent that such improvement action plans are not, in fact, paying off? It's really a generic type question, Leader, albeit it relates today to this specific service.
We will bring monitoring reports to members on a regular basis to ensure that they see that we are moving forward with these plans.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, it's page 99 on the percentage of staff who've completed an annual performance development review. I mean, there's obviously quite a big range between 95 and 78%. I think reference is made in item 11 to long-term sickness and maternity leave having an impact on this. Do those members of staff who don't receive a PDR in 1 year, are they prioritised to get one the next year? Because what we don't want is members of staff who don't have PDRs year after year, particularly when the structure of the council is changing so quickly.
Chair, very much so. The long-term absence, as you can see, that's increasing. That's in the maximising attendance report. That does have an impact. In fact, it led to us reviewing the overall target for PDR completion to 95%, mindful of the fact that we're never really likely, in very few exceptions, to meet that 100%, although you will note from reports that we have actually achieved that in one service, but more likely the 95 is an achievable target. In terms of what we do for staff who miss them, we don't wait, we actually introduce that as soon as they can return.
Okay, Ian, sorry.
Thanks, Leader. Just in regards to it's page 107, it's a complaint handling procedure. I think according to this, we're at 64% against an 80% target. I'd like to get an understanding. Is that a corporate picture we're looking at there, or is that just within the Chief Executive Services? So get an understanding and how fit for purpose is the actual improvement action plan?
It's a corporate figure, sir, and the action plan is moving. We have improved our complaints handling considerably. We now have a professional team who handle complaints. We're in regular dialogue with the SPSO. We've adopted the SPSO complaints procedure, so we are improving on that, but we can always do better.
Where is the pressure? Because I've got an understanding where the pressure might be, but I'd like to hear that for yourself rather than front load the answer. And what's our expectation for next year in regards to actually meeting the 80% target?
The intention is that we will meet the 80% target. I'm not sure just exactly what Councillor Carruthers means about the pressures.
Well, there's a lot of complaints going to planning in particular. That has been a pressure. We've seen that through the EEI now committee. That's a pressure. That's why it's a corporate view. But you've also got social work, you've got education, you've got the Chief Executive Service themselves. I just get a clear understanding. If that's a corporate picture across the council, because it comes the complaints handling procedures comes under your service, I just understand. Are you dealing with? Is this reflective? Is it within Chief Executive Services in particular, or are you actually coping with a pressure out with that's coming from other departments within the council? I need to get an understanding of that, because if it is, we need to maybe view this differently as we go on.
The corporate complaints unit deal with all the complaints that come in. The intention is that complaints should be dealt with at the point of contact. So if someone complains to an individual member of staff, they should be dealt with there and then to a satisfactory conclusion. That, unfortunately, doesn't always happen, and it gets ramped up once we come. I can give the member a copy of the complaints process, which sets out how they're dealt with. Initially, they're dealt with within the service. They then go to the corporate complaints unit. Corporate complaints unit appoint an investigator, etc., and it's taken forward. from memory, yes, the pressure areas tend to be in planning. Social work complaints are dealt with slightly differently. They go through to a review body, but the main issues tend to be planning.
Okay, you want back in here?
So I suppose that's something that I'll certainly be looking at through the budget process. Ken, I think something has to be highlighted and looked at and drilled into a wee bit further.
Okay, can we go to the recommendations? I think we've reviewed it. In 2.1, we've scrutinised. 2.2, 2.3 is scrutinised. John?
Yeah, I don't know whether it would be an addition into 2.3 or 2.4 is the Chief Executive's promise to actually include exemption reports where key stages and projects aren't actually being met, rather than having to try and figure out for ourselves.
Yeah, this is operational action. I mean, you've got reassurances that it's going to be done, so yeah.
Just, I mean, Jim's brought up a really good point there, but would that apply corporately then? Would that apply across other services? How would we make sure that was disseminated?
The Chief Executive Service is responsible for performance monitoring and management, and we will ensure that all services include that. The Chief Exec's given that undertaking.
Joe?
It was just to ask, Leader, that you fit in somewhere the report that's going to come back about the number of people within the staff number of people within the council that are currently under an action plan. Yeah.
Just for clarity, Councillor Dykes, we could do that corporately, but actually the stress is probably more useful for each individual committee, because obviously we cover 2,000 odd different services. So therefore it might be better if members want that to go back to each service committee to allow you to then ask about perhaps the drivers within that service that might be communicated, because obviously there are two services in particular that have the vast majority of it. A corporate one probably wouldn't allow you to get that level of understanding or scrutiny. So if it's helpful, we could ask for individual reports to come back to each of the service committee in relation to that and the actions being taken by the management team.
I don't have a problem with that, but I do think it should be reported, that total should be reported back to this committee, because it is in charge of the policy. So, but yeah, I think what you're saying about it going to the service committee is good, but I think the total should come back here.
Fine. Either?
Chair, I have no problem with that, but previously at the Health and Safety Subcommittee, when it did exist, one of the things were that we wouldn't get directorate figures on stress, because it could actually be a small service and the numbers could possibly lead to identification of who the officers were. And it's just how we can make sure that we can get the information required without that problem.
Chair, the way the stress survey is conducted is we actually combine small units into larger units, so that doesn't happen. And maybe the understanding is we won't actually produce that information at a level where that could be a risk.
With that, can we give the recommendations that we've done all that? Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Item 7, which is the refreshed business plan, Chief Executive Service. It's a report by the Director, Chief Executive Service. This report ties up with the end of the year report, and it provides the committee with details of proposed updates to the business plan for the current financial year. The first part of the plan sets out the service objectives, operating values, and how it contributes to the overall priorities of the council. There's also some interesting information regarding budget and staffing levels, as well as what the department does on behalf of the council. Annex 3 it provides a commentary on departmental performance during financial year 2013-14 and details how these new indicators, which members are being asked to endorse. There have been no changed or deleted indicators. The Director and his team will deal with any members' questions. Members? Okay. Can we agree the recommendation to approve the refreshed sections? Okay, thank you. If we move on to item 8, which is Revenue Services, Implementation of Financial Code 11. The Council has a legal responsibility to maximise the income from council tax and non-domestic rates, as well as ensuring that any money owed for it, for other services, including overpayments of housing benefits, paid. I am pleased to see that the Council has achieved its highest ever collection rate for council tax at 96% and non-domestic rates at 98.3%. And we have assisted over 3,500 people in Dumfries and Galloway to claim additional welfare benefits and awards totalling £6.35 million. Unfortunately, however, it's as the same as previous years. There are people who are not in a position to pay their debts to the Council, and Financial Code 11 this requires us to account for these. This means writing off the debts for which there is no realistic chance of recovery. Officers have the authority to undertake this financial exercise for accounts below £5,000. This report provides a summary of those debts which have written off, and also seeks the authority for members to write off other debts in excess of the £5,000. As I've said before, this is an accountancy exercise, and clearly if an individual becomes able to repay the debt, then this is collected. There are 4 instances where debts are written off, namely sequestration of the debtor, where the debtor has disappeared and cannot be traced, where there are no realistic prospects of recovery because of the debtor's financial position, or where it is no longer economic to pursue the debtor. Helen and Alex will answer members' questions on this. Jane?
Is there a warning system that the council employs when they can see that there have been problems, so that we don't get ourselves into a position? I mean, you know, and have we re-looked at that to see whether we should revisit it in the light of experience?
Okay, do you want to answer this, Helen?
Thanks, Chair. We'll have a set recovery procedure, so obviously somebody gets their initial bill, regardless of whether it's non-domestic rate and council tax, they'll get reminders, final reminders, and each opportunity they're advised to contact us directly to discuss their debt. Where either they don't contact us or we can't come to an arrangement, it is past the sheriff officer. Each of those stages we will talk to the debtor, where we can get in contact with them and offer them, you know, financial advice or money advice or debt advice where it's appropriate. So we do continue to try and utilise advice services for debtors wherever possible.
Okay, Ian.
Thanks, Leader. 2.1 outlines the only real decision we're making today is in regards to Appendix 3, and the only query I've got on that is number 15, without getting into great much detail, but the last box on that says registered addresses in Jersey, unit trust, so no funds. Could you just tell me what that means in kind of layman terms, please, Lorna?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The actual debtor there is a trust, and it's notoriously difficult to collect debt from a trust. Because the trust is actually in Jersey, we've actually took legal advice from our own legal services on how we pursue that. And what the advice we've been given is that we had no realistic prospect of actually being able to pursue that any further than we had, and we'd been in contact in our usual letters and tried to contact the debtor, but the legal advice we were given that there would be there's no further prospect of recovery in that.
Sean?
Yeah, I was really just following on from the question. Obviously this is all redacted, but I think item 7, it's about whether or not you actually speak, if there's a historical kind of issue with maybe a commercial site, then obviously that will be on your radar, but it's maybe, do you have discussions with the likes of Scottish Enterprise, etc., so that when they are in discussions with a new business that, you know, as I said, that's not the first time that area, that site has failed?
Not directly with Scottish Enterprise. I mean, where the ratepayer or the debtor contacts us and discusses an issue, yes, you know, we'll enter into as many discussions and agreements and provide advice, but we haven't had as far as I'm aware, I can check back with the team leader there, but we don't have that sort of contact with Scottish Enterprise.
Okay, Gail.
Thank you, Leader. Just a very quick question. On page 161, sales ledger write-offs, it's got police and fire included in there for the 13-14 year, and that transferred on the 1st of April 2013. So why have we still got debts in relation to police and fire?
Lorna?
I would need to double check that. I'm assuming that is the dates that have been rolled forward, but I would need to double check and come back to committee to confirm that.
Thanks, Leader. Just on page 157, and it's number 10, and this would appear to be one business that for 4 years has not paid any rates. I think we should be getting in there a wee bit earlier, because that's obviously been a part year, then a full year, another full year, then a part year. I know in the distant past, we've been in there a lot sooner with the bailiffs and seizing goods and sending them to auction to recover our money. And I really think we should intervene a lot sooner, because if you total up that amount of money, if we'd intervened in the second year, and if that meant forcing the business into bankruptcy, so be it, because we wouldn't have been left owing so much money. So I think we've got to be a bit harder with some of these businesses. They shouldn't be allowed to get away with 4 years not paying their rates.
No, we wouldn't leave them. I think, again, I'd have to go back and check the exact details of that one. I wouldn't, and looking at it, I don't think it's that they haven't paid any rates. It will be that there'll have been a payment, potentially a payment arrangement in there. At some point then they've disappeared and we've tried to trace them, and if not, but we don't let businesses or a debtor go that amount of time without, because we put sheriff officer will be enforced within the year of that payment being due. So they would use all their diligences available as soon as possible, so we don't let something run that length of time. But I can check the actual background of that one individual.
Jane?
It was the same point, really. It's the fact that it's rolled forward, and I'm with Councillor McCoughtry on this.
Can I help members with that? If the sheriff officer visits someone and the person enters into a payment plan with them, the sheriff officer will generally accept that there is a payment plan in place rather than put a business out of business. However, this particular individual appears to have entered into a payment plan, paid it for a period of time and then disappeared.
Yeah, Chair, it's reference to page 148. 3.9 in housing benefit overpayments, and I am in communication or correspondence with Lorna, and it relates to, if you like, to try and avoid any potential debt. And Lorna has replied to me in so much that we've still faced problems in the bedroom tax and the assessment procedure in terms of how housing benefit is calculated for people who have extra rooms or whatever the terminology is, the houses in which they live in, because as I understand it, the benefit is calculated on only the assessed needs, and their other rooms do not qualify for that housing benefit. So it's calculated that way, and we could find in some of these overpayments or debts that people are still suffering up there. My question is there any way we can overcome this, either operationally or politically, in terms of the unfairness of it in penalising people where they're not getting full housing benefit and therefore perhaps not entitled to discretionary housing payment?
This is on overpayments. I'll let you come in, Lorna.
Thanks, Chair. I think the situation that Councillor Scobie is describing here is where someone is not entitled to housing benefit because their maximum rent that their housing benefit is paid on is reduced because of spare room subsidy, bedroom tax, whatever you want to call it. In those scenarios, there would never be a housing benefit overpayment, so we would never look to recover it. The bottom line is there just would be no entitlement at all. And in those circumstances where there's no entitlement to housing benefit, we can't give that person discretionary housing payment because there needs to be an underlying entitlement to housing benefit in those cases. I have responded to Councillor Scobie in an email on that, saying that housing benefit is a national scheme. It would require legislation change at national level. Therefore, locally, we have no discretion to do anything about those cases. It would need a national change. So it would either lobbying at a political higher level for national government, because even Scottish Government don't have that type of power because it is a national scheme.
Okay, Ivor.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer the question. Compared to other authorities with our debts and sundry debtors, etc., do we write off more in a percentage term or less, or are we in line with the rest of Scotland?
I don't have those figures. I mean, obviously our collection levels in Scotland are high, so if you would take that sort of comparison, we're collecting more money than most Scotland's, or one of the highest collectors. Therefore, I would assume that our write-off rate is probably either comparable or better, but I don't have that information.
Okay, so it is less, yeah. John?
Thanks, Chair. Do you have any discretion for dealing with householders who state they are on an exceptionally tight budget and can only pay council tax in 12 monthly instalments rather than the normal reduced number?
10 monthly instalments is a statutory scheme. However, we do have a 12 monthly option where the taxpayer chooses to pay by direct debit. So there is a 12 monthly option through direct debit for those households.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman. Just the inference made by Councillor McCaughtrey and Maitland earlier in regards to the council should have a much tougher stance in regards to business and enterprise when it comes to debt collecting. I'd just like to get reassurances that we're actually fair and consistent across the board when we actually do go forward and collect our debts.
We consistently apply it. I don't think we are soft on debts. We do pursue debtors. In fact, I'm surprised that members are saying we don't, because the most complaints I get is the fact that I am pursuing somebody for money. But we do pursue, and it's applied consistently across Dumfries and Galloway.
I think we need to, there are very few here, but we need to also remember that businesses can submit accounts up to 18 months after the end of the financial year. So it could potentially be 3 years before a business fails. So therefore, our engagement with them in a payment plan, so realistically the business, even though if it doesn't have a cash flow issue, might not fail for up to that 3 year period, because it could be up to 18 months after the end of the year when they lodge accounts. So, and again, under the law with the Sheriff Officer, they enter into a payment plan. So if we pursue them for 12 months, then they enter into a payment plan, we could be up to 12 months later before that payment plan then comes through. So we have few, but we do pursue them. And we have the advantage that we have very few transient population in Dumfries and Galloway. So it's a benefit, but also a disbenefit to us that people don't move on. In Glasgow, it's much more difficult to collect issues such as council tax or companies because of the turnover. But you've got to remember that, as I said, companies could be 3 years before a company would actually fold.
Okay, can we move to the recommendations? Can we approve 2.1, note 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4? Alistair?
Leader, can I say in relation to 2.4, sir, I would like to see the word note, or the phrase note and approve, because I think, it's a good job well done, and we should reflect that in the minutes, Leader, if you're agreeable.
I think you're absolutely right. It is a good news story, because we're doing a fantastic job, the team's doing a fantastic job, and I think that should be reflected. Okay, thanks. Can we move on to item 9? This is the early retirement policy. At a meeting of the Council on the 26th of June, members agreed to receive a report outlining options for change in the current early retirement voluntary severance scheme. While we continue to operate a no-compulsory redundancy policy, ERVS does assist us in achieving savings. The scheme has proved to be a very useful tool in helping the Council facilitate change. Members will see that since the launch of the policy in 2010, there has been a significant reduction in employees participating in the scheme, and there is an acceptance that we do need to review it to ensure that while it remains attractive to employees, it is also sustainable and affordable. Benchmarking has been undertaken with other local authorities, and you will see that our scheme is at the lower end of attractability amongst sister authorities. It's interesting to note that we have achieved savings of £27 million over the last 4 financial years through the scheme, unless anyone comes up with the idea that the scheme is some form of gravy train. The average redundancy payment has been about £10,000, with the average pension being £4,500 per annum. The report does set out different forms of early retirement and a number of options to employees as to their terms of release as set out in paragraph 4.2. The trade unions have been consulted and are in agreement with the proposal, and it's now for members to determine if they wish to proceed on the basis of the revised policy. Paul, sorry, I thought you said Ivor there. Paul and Isla will answer any questions. Paul?
Yeah, Chair, and I asked the question at the full council meeting in respect of those that have gone on before or gone before us in terms of early retirement, and it's particular to the reference you make there, Chair, under 3.8, where we are 25th out of 32 and indeed 85th out of 98 public organisations. And it's really, you know, there's a resentment building up with employees who have gone on and now seeing there could be enhancements to people who are now being considered if it's agreed by the committee and the council. And it's whether indeed we are in a position or we can do anything for those that have accepted it in the past under those circumstances. I see Gavin getting a wee smack there, but it's just that resentment, you know, that where we were and our position currently to those that have gone, and I accept Gavin's explanation in terms of that this will benefit what I regard to as the blue collar workers, that those on low pay or in that grade. So in that respect, it's to the ones that have gone on before.
You want to comment?
Chair, I think it's just one of these things that each scheme is open. It's open for a period of time. It's open for acceptance, and the staff that I've left so far have accepted it on that basis. It's for the council to decide if this is now the time to amend the terms of the scheme in order that it continues to remain a viable tool as far as reaching the economies that the council is facing.
I've got to say, I was wondering whether they go back to Edgy Point and ask for more, because it's a better scale now, but anyway, I'll bother. Ida?
Thank you, Chair. It's with regard to the flexible retirement. Could you just explain exactly how that works? It says here that currently people who wish to go in that might not get, because it might be a cost to the council. What could the cost to the council be? Because I've tried to work it out from what's in the papers, but I'm just not 100% sure.
Certainly, Chair. The reference to the actual flexible retirement terms is that if it cost anything before, the flexible retirement was not approved. We had instances where a few £100 it would have cost, and we had to reject it on that basis. So this amended proposal in the revised scheme is to allow some flexibility around that, particularly when we can demonstrate that savings above what the initial costs might be can be got back over a reasonable period. So essentially it would be a sort of spend to save basis. So that's one of the amendments that we think is appropriate to make at this stage. In terms of the background context to flexible retirement, it's part of the regulations, and the council has a scheme which supports that initiative. But we feel that there's a barrier there to release, and it's a very important part sometimes of individuals ultimately working towards full retirement.
Jen?
Thank you. That actually helps me. I was equally mystified. I will say that I think it's not so much the issue of changing the terms, although obviously that's what we're discussing now. It's about the merry-go-round that people resent colossally. The public mind very much that people retire and then come back. And I hope that we've got that one stitched up and that there will be no implications with respect to this change, because that's something that people really do object to. And one of the briefing notes that could go on our new improved website would be the Council's policy with respect to retirement, because if you could just point people, this is the way it is, this is the way it's arranged, and these are the rules. I think again the public out there wouldn't think that there is a kind of gravy train going on. Because they do think that it's too confusing, it's not clear, and they think things are not fair to them, the public who are paying. With respect to people who have gone before, that's up to them. They decided that that was a good idea for them to go at that point, and there's absolutely no looking back at all. I would say we have to look forward.
Gavin?
Thank you. I think that for clarification, there are whilst I understand members wish for staff not to come back, if they then reapply for post legally, we're unable to exclude them. However, that's why in part of the business case process we are able to discuss with the individuals their intention to take it forward. But I can absolutely assure you that we have a monthly meeting with the trade unions, or the joint trade unions, and the Financial Challenges Working Group, in which each an individual instance in which a staff member comes back is rigorously discussed, and there are very, very few. And my wish is the same with members, that nobody returns. Under flexible retirement, just for absolute clarification for members, this is not about someone taking another job at 4 weeks. This is about them stepping down in their existing job. And of course, one of the business case criteria they need to satisfy is, can they still do it? An example I will give you where it could be very useful to us is those coming to the end of their career who we would like to let go. However, we would need to retrain someone. We have a number of individuals, perhaps in DG1, in supervisory or clerk posts, who would like to go, but we need to train up their replacement rather than get out to the market. So it would be useful to keep them on in their skill sets and a flexible retirement for an agreed period as part of the business case, to allow that other individual to be trained to step up into their post. And that's how we've been using it, and would hope to use it under this scheme. I think you're absolutely right about getting the clarity under there. There are a number of people who immediately talk about the fat cats, but as the leader has said, the average salary is $4,500. Invariably, and the vast majority is to women. And in Dumfries and Galloway, a number of those women can actually be the sole breadwinner into their family. So therefore, I think we need to proactively, following members' decision, go out to make sure that, particularly in the website and in publication, and particularly for all staff, they fully understand what this scheme means. And also, this is the entitlement under the pension regs. There's an idea staff have been paying in, and I think if we look to the changes in England that are resulting in strikes, the staff in Scotland universally agreed to change the pension scheme 5 years ago, and last year again moved to a scheme that is in fact harder with more input than the one that the English staff are in strike for just now. So it does show the staff's willingness to put additional contributions in to support the benefits. And in fact, but the Scottish scheme is better because we've reduced the element for the lower paid and increased it for the higher paid, and that was unanimously agreed by staff and all trade unions. So I think we need to get that context out there, that staff have agreed to take additional contributions to support their pension, and all we're doing is offering them the opportunity to access their benefits at that time that suits the business and suits their personal circumstance.
Okay, John?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. It's just to follow on from what Councillor Scobie said. I too brought up the circumstances at full council. However, the contents of this paper actually make my feelings even more so that it's unfair. We changed this system in 2010, so for the last 4 years the council's offered a less attractive one than we once did, and for those 4 years a substantial amount of staff have left under the scheme. But we now want to make it more attractive again for the future.
And as the Chief Executive just said, the vast majority of these people that left or are looking to leave under the new enhanced will be the majority women. A lot of them will be sole breadwinners. What's the difference between the ones that are going to go in the future and the ones that have left in the past under the scheme that was less effective since 2010? My own view is it hardly seems fair in those staff that have left under the less attractive scheme, particularly since it's only been enforced since 2010. And to go on to the flexible retirement, the Chief Executive also said that it was a stepping down. When you look at page 172, it says employee chooses to reduce hours in current post or chooses to apply for a lower grade posting, so they're not actually stepping down. My question would be, if they want to reduce their hours to improve their work-life balance, and I can't fault anybody for wanting to do that, why can't they take part-time working? That would not cost the council a penny. And I'm not an expert in employment law, but if somebody is still employed by the council, even although they may be on flexible retirement, is that officer then not entitled to be considered for promotion because he is still being employed by the council?
Thanks, Jim. I'll let Paul answer that. And just, I think you could go around in circles in this. I'm quite sure, I retired a time ago, you retired a time ago, Jim, and it was maybe either better or worse than it is now. And if yours is better than what it was now, all the ones that have got less pension now say, well, we should be getting what Jim gets, or we should be getting more than what Ronnie gets, or whatever. So I think you can go round in circles with this. I know you're saying it's 4 years ago, but in an industry that was changing every 2 years. But anyway, that's my opinion on it. Paul?
Chair, I don't think we can look back. It's a decision that we make consciously at a point in time, and the package available is agreed by the individual on release. In terms of can they not take part-time working, yes they can, but under pension regulations which apply not only across all 32 councils in Scotland, but in fact the UK, that's a component of their pension scheme. So they can avail them of that. What the council has to do is frame a scheme which frames the rules around their entitlements when that happens. And essentially what we are seeing is we've run the scheme successfully for a number of years now. It's provided positive benefits for the council in terms of savings. It's been at no cost to the council thus far. We're actually trying to amend it such that where there's a modest cost, and in most cases that would be overcome by salary savings that accrue over the period of time that flexible retirement operates, then the council should use that in the same way as other councils.
Jim, you went back in.
Yeah. Plain answer, in plain English. Why can't they take part-time work in it, and would that cost the council any more, or would it cost the council less than flexible retirement? And I didn't actually get an answer to the question of, if they're still employed by the council, are they entitled to be considered for promotion to a higher grade? And I understand what the leader's saying about it's a point in time. Yes, I retired under a system where my retirement was of a fairly better size than what my ex-colleagues are now going to be retiring under. I don't think that's fair either.
I didn't say it was fair, but it'd be very difficult to go back. But, Paul?
Chair, the flexible retirement, because of the way we've run it, it's cost the council nothing. So it's exactly the same as if they'd opted for part-time employment, albeit that if we chose not to backfill those hours, we could make that saving too. In terms of can they apply for another job, yes, of course they can. There's been no incidents where that's happened. There's also been no incidents where people have actually wanted to increase their hours back up to their former hours.
But can they apply for a job of a higher grade?
Yes.
Okay, Ian.
Thanks, Leader. I think when I first looked at this, I did golden handshake, gravy train, all that kind of stuff came to mind. But after making a few probing questions out with the committee and reading it, considering what was there, Actually, when it comes to paragraph 3.5, the only question means there was a lack of projected financial information within this report for me, but that'll come out through time. And 3.5 is the only bit where I can really see it tying in. Looks very encouraging if you look at the last box in there, because it does say capitalised savings, and it's revenue savings is what we're looking at instinctively. That's what we're trying to achieve. So I'd just like to get the correlation between the two. Capitalised savings, but it's revenue savings what we're looking at. I'm hoping that applies accordingly.
What do you mean by capitalised? Capitalised is the term that uses, if you take all the revenue savings over the period up to 65, what's the total amount? That's what, in this context, and it means. So effectively, it is the total of all the revenue savings if we'd still continued to employ the person up to their normal retirement age of 65. And of course, over the next years, that'll then move to 66 and 67. So therefore, the saving gets even greater. So yes, capitalised is the total of all the revenue put into one lump sum.
Ivor.
Back to this sort of flexible retirement. The idea that you go from 5 days a week and you take a 20% cut in hours, which makes you 4 days a week, who's got to cover the extra day a week? Or is there efficiencies in there we should be looking further into for future budgets?
Yes, either in the business case it needs to come forward. The business case needs to justify how the work can be undertaken in the 4 days. And in a number of cases it will be where they're actually mentoring someone to come and take their job, or the job will then disappear in a future restructuring. And a number of the cases of adult health and social care, people are applying for that on the assumption that the job will disappear eventually. So they need to satisfy both the financial business case, which isn't going to cost us or it will be recovered, but secondly, how the work then needs to be covered. That then goes to a pension panel for scrutiny. The other issue is about applying for a future job. Well, actually, if a business case has been submitted, you volunteered to go to step down, and therefore you've entered into that signed agreement with the council, and then you apply for a promoted post, then that would be a valid consideration for the people to consider in the change to take forward. But because you actually have to physically sign up to the business case and the support and the agreement at that time. But yes, and so therefore that's why it is a tool, and that's why they apply for it. But a number have been refused on the ground that it is not possible to do the job with support in any way moving forward. So therefore, yes, there are comprehensive business cases, and of course the total number of these is reported on an annual basis for scrutiny by members. All of the retirement comes forward to members for scrutiny.
Okay, can we move to the recommendations? 2.1 can we note, and 2.2 can we approve? Sorry, Jane. Yep.
Sorry, Chairman, I did want in. It was just to do with reviewing this. I noticed that this is to be reviewed by 6.1 of the actual policy. It will be subject to regular review by the Head of Organisation Development and HR. That's to ensure fairness and consistency of application. I mean, should we be looking at this politically in arguably a couple of years to see how it's worked? I mean, if we say that now, that we're going to do that, I think that it actually, in a way, focuses minds.
Perhaps, to make it easy, that an annual report is produced on the retirements. So part of that would be the opportunity for members to renew the effectiveness and efficacy of their policy. So we'd ensure that came forward as part of that report and give the members the opportunity to review it. Because obviously, as it's a new scheme, we'd need to renew the effectiveness given the financial challenges that we face.
Okay, can we note 2.1 and approve 2.2? Sorry, Jim. John first. Sorry.
Thanks, Leader. With regard to expressions of interest in ERVS, how many of the 3,000 odd people who have expressed interest are still in the pipeline?
That's actually a hard stat to maintain on an ongoing basis, but it's fair to say that what we have been mindful of in reviewing the scheme was what was the nature of those who expressed an interest but didn't actually decide to go any further. Now, that's not that people are pursued for uptake, because clearly it's a voluntary decision to actually say, I'd like to at least consider the figures. and employees can do that safely. It's not binding on their part. But we do actually know who have expressed interest before, and we're looking with keen interest as to whether, in fact, the proposal satisfies some of that in terms of future uptake.
Okay, Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, sir. It's just going back to the comment that was made a couple of minutes ago. Might it not be helpful, Leader, if we amended paragraph 2.2 somewhat, to provide that while we're approving the changed terms of the revised scheme, that reference is made to the monitoring and review arrangements in section 6 of the report? I'm sure it could be readily enough done, sir, by perhaps the words "it being appreciated that," and make reference, as it were, in the minuted decision to the fact that, it is monitored and will be reviewed. I think it would give a certain amount of assurance in the minds of certain members, Leader. It's meant to be a helpful suggestion.
I agree with you. That sounds reasonable. Ian?
That was the same point. It wasn't explicitly, but just so long as we can see that, when you see £74 million worth of capitalised savings over the last 4 years, then it's absolutely clear that this does stack up. So if we see that future reference to the decision we make today over the next year or two, then absolutely fine to back it.
Okay, we'll make sure that's minuted. Okay, Creed? Okay. Move on to item 10. This is a job evaluation policy and job grading review procedures. The job evaluation policy, it's an essential tool in formalising and creating fairness in the creation of and review of jobs by the Council. As a result of single status, there's been a moratorium on regrading of existing jobs, and this report proposes a revised policy in relation to the regrading of existing jobs, whether at the request of an employer or in the recommendation of a manager. The report has been fully consulted with trade unions who will support the job grading review process, forming part of the grading panels. There are concerns that we will be inundated with review requests, and there are risks associated with pressure on budgets should the implementation of the policy result in increased staff costs. It is, however, essential that the Council pay a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, and by this process we will achieve that. I'll ask Paul to answer any members' questions. Ian?
Thanks. I think this is due. Totally in agreement with it. It's the only real question that's lying out there. Could there be a negative side to this? Could there be a job evaluation that actually brings somebody back down the pay scale? I think, I suppose other than that, I totally agree with it.
Absolutely, it actually goes both ways. I think a negative response is less likely, but it is actually recognised under the process.
Okay, can we approve the recommendation? Sorry, John.
I'm going to try and take a bit of a liberty here, Leader. I realise that this paper doesn't specifically cover the current problems, in inverted commas, that exist within one part of a service area where staff were too paid into the Council on better condition than those that were already employed by the Council. Has there been any progress at all being made to address that anomaly?
There's actually limited scope by which we can vary the contracts of employees who are brought in, because those would be illegal under the very regulations that's set to protect employees. There has been modest progress in the service to which you refer, in terms of just with the passage of time and changes within the way that service operates, that has resulted in some change to that balance. If that's not too vague a response back to you, Councillor.
It was suggested that there was a way round about it that may be appropriate, but I'll take that up out with the Chamber.
Okay, thanks. Can we approve the recommendation? At 11, so this is Workforce Establishment and Attendance Management Update report for 12-month review. The Council Workforce Establishment at 1st April 2014 comprised of 8,591 positions with a full-time equivalent of 6,151. Notwithstanding the Council's ERVS scheme, there has been an increase in 95 FTEs over the last 12 months. However, this is predominantly due to the appointment of modern apprentices, graduate placements and also teachers. The report provides useful information on the staffing profiles, both in terms of gender, age and wage bands. The meat of the report relates to attendance, which we spoke about earlier, attendance management, and as we discussed earlier, when considering the Chief Executive Service Management Report, maximising attendance is an issue which does need to be addressed. The report sets out a number of priority areas in this respect, and I'm sure that Paul will be happy to answer any questions. Members, John?
Do you think that planning and environment ought to take some more modern apprentices? Page 196.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
It's just a sort of general observation through you, Leader. I'm just asking whether we might expect that. It just seems quite low, and I don't think proportionately that planning and environment is that low in terms of the number of people employed in the service.
Very business, Paul. Is there any reason why you think that?
I don't think there's any real reason, but if P&R committee wish me to, I can discuss that directly with the director and see whether those arrangements could be put in place.
Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, Leader. It's paragraph 3.20, it's a reference to Audit Scotland and the exemplar authorities, for want of a better term, Leader, Orkney Islands, in relation to local government employees in Falkirk and West Lothian for teaching staff, and particularly Falkirk and West Lothian. That's a pretty impressive statistic, I would suggest, Leader. And the thrust of my question would be that, we should never be too proud to learn from good practice or best practice elsewhere. So how then, could we best learn from, these two authorities, appreciating that, there will be differences between Dumfries and Galloway Council and them. And indeed the same sentiments would go for Orkney Council, Leader.
Chair, it's very much part of our business since we established maximised attendance as a project a few years ago to benchmark nationally, to look at good practice, and we are in fact part of a benchmarking group of which those authorities are members. It's fair to say that part of the reason and explanation is that the profiles and occupational numbers for certain of those authorities differ, in some cases quite radically, from that of the Council. And if you employ, it's known that certain occupational groups have higher levels of absence. We work to a universal standard across all occupational groups. But it's fair to say, for example, that the number of days absence in social work services is likely to be higher than groups, say, within Chief Exec Service. But we do look at those trends, we look at what they're doing, and some of what we're starting to build up and indicated at paragraph 340 is a response to that. In fact, what we should be doing, where should we be placing our energies and what our priorities are, based on a local context.
Okay, John?
It's just regarding the table 1 at the top of page 196. It gives us the statistics for the 1st April 2014. While I'm not going to dispute the reasons for the increase that are outlined in 3.3, it would have been nice to have the numbers for the 1st April 2013 set out in a table, or even incorporated into that table showing 2013's numbers. It would also be handy if members could have a breakdown of the numbers, not just full-time equivalents, of the number of staff that are in permanent contracts, the number that are in temporary contracts, and for how long those temporary contracts are, and the reason, the number that are in fixed-term contracts, and the number that are in casual and seasonal contracts as well.
I've seen Heather nodding away, but...
Chair, the reason we removed the table was we'd far too much information at times, and it was actually hard to follow. So what we've actually done is just done a contrast and what the what the main differences are, but we're happy to reintroduce that. We also for a time had a focus on temporary employees, not necessarily saying for how long and what the nature of those were, but we did give a breakdown of those, and then we could periodically put that back in. But if members want a more comprehensive report, that's no difficulty.
Regarding my first one for the numbers as at 1412, it would have been good to have that in the table. As regarding my second point, or the breakdown of the numbers, no full-time equivalents, I'd be quite happy to receive that via email, unless any other members want it.
Yeah, you can go to all members. Is it the same point, Tom? Is it? Okay.
I was just going to make the point that Table 1 isn't actually the number of employees anyway. Table 1 is the number of jobs. It's establishment. So in fact, there might well be 8,591 jobs. Doesn't necessarily mean to say there's 8,591 employees.
Sorry, Leader, the last one, the last line in the table says full-time equivalent total.
It was just with regard to the turnover. Historically, we've always been below the average, and we're at 6.88% at 1st of April. Is that higher or lower than normal for us? Another one was with regard to the resignations. How many of those are specifically just on voluntary severance, and how many are actually people leaving our service to go on to another job?
With regard to the turnover, it's been up by 0.5% over the last year. It was sitting at 6.3% at 1st of April 2013. We've had a look at where the leavers are going, looking at the exit interviews, and quite a number of staff have moved outside the region to other positions, and a number have moved to other occupations within the region as well.
Okay, Jim.
Thanks, Chair. I'm assuming the figure for in Table 7, the figure of 131 teachers leaving council employment, underestimates the actual turnover of teachers, because a number of the teachers will remain in council employment, but they will move from school to school.
That ostensibly counts the number who are actually leaving, whereas churn would be where they actually leave one school to take up perhaps a promoted post elsewhere.
Okay, can we go to the recommendations? I think we've considered 2.1, 2.2, and I think we covered the 2.3 in an earlier report. Okay, thank you. Item 12, this is developing the Council's anti-poverty strategy. As members know, the development of proper anti-poverty strategy was agreed by the Council when the new priorities and commitments were adopted last year, and I've no doubt will remain a priority for members. We do have a shameful record as the region with the lowest average pay in Scotland, and we have an unacceptable high levels of poverty, often hidden given the rural nature of our region. This report is very much an enabling report and sets out a direction for travel in the development of the anti-poverty strategy. It's pleasing to note that a number of the Council's key priorities is being met and that a graduate employee has been allocated to support the development of the strategy, which will be fully developed by June 2015. I'm sure all members will look forward to receiving further reports and contributing to the development of the policy, which will dovetail with a number of other policies which currently support our commitment to tackle poverty and mitigate against the impact of welfare reform. I'm sure that members will have a lot to say about this report and how we will take the strategy forward. Liz is here to answer any questions that members may have. Jane?
How are we actually going to deal with this in terms of practicalities with respect to the third sector? Third sector is badged up here quite substantially, and I'd like to have some assistance with how you think that's going to work.
Certainly, as you'll see in the stages that we've identified, the very first in 3.12.1 is about speaking to our partners, securing their commitment to a joint approach. And that's certainly the dialogue that we've started with them is about what work they're doing, what organisations they have who are working in this field. And later on, you'll see that at 3.12.8, we're planning to have a seminar, so there will be a joint discussion between the different sectors, structured around about what the objectives of the strategy are and what work is already ongoing.
Jane?
Yeah, can I come back? I think, with the best will in the world, we can all have a sort of seminar, we can learn about the individual issues, but I think it would be immensely helpful if we came to such a seminar armed with real information about what's going on in each of our wards. And that's coming through because of the information that's coming through the Crichton Observatory. And my feeling is that if members should definitely be given that and really have a chance to absorb that information and consider things practically, so that they're absolutely armed with that before they come anywhere near anyone else.
Yes.
Yes, and again, in stage 1, we have identified that there is a wealth of data there. It's in different places. And one of the initial pieces of work is really to bring together research about our region that is existing. And I think we're likely to identify further work that perhaps primary research about things that we don't know. There might be what we would call qualitative research, which is about speaking to people actually facing poverty and testing out some of the issues with them. So I think it is a two-stage approach to the research. There's data there that we need to bring together, and certainly noted the ward level about that. And then there may be further research that we need to do once we've identified what the issues are.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Under the 3.5, it appears that a number of the indicators have been extracted on the whole from the SIMD. However, as we're all aware, the SIMD isn't designed for rural Scotland with low population and the dispersed nature of our population. In our area, the poverty and disadvantages that goes on in rural areas remains largely hidden. How are we going to ensure that we're able to identify all the residents of the region who currently suffer or are likely to suffer poverty in the future will be identified, and the types of assistance that will be given? And under 3.6, it's regarding the welfare reform. Nobody here should underestimate the harm that these cuts are causing and were going to cause. These reforms, which incidentally did start under the last Labour government, were taken up by the Tory and Lib Dem coalition government and will result in £43 million being removed from the economy of Dumfries and Galloway. That's £460 for every working age adult in Dumfries and Galloway. Unfortunately, the 13 wards in Dumfries and Galloway, there are 5 wards that will suffer more than the average. The loss for every working adult in Mid and Upper Nisdale will be 490. North West Dumfries, it will be 530. Mid Galloway will be 540. Wigton West will be 550. And in Stranraer North Rins, it will be 580 for every person of working age. We should also remember that this loss is not the end of it. The Tories have quite clearly stated that a further £25 billion of cuts will be required. They have also indicated that £12 billion of these cuts will once again be taken from welfare. And if we actually think there's going to be any change post the 2015 general election, I think we're all in for a shock. The Labour Party have clearly indicated that they will use the present government's...
Thanks for the political points, John. I think if you had a question on whatever like that's fine. I mean, we can all go into that.
My question is the plans are afoot that we are going to be hit by a regional cap on social welfare. And we all know that is going to be based around the housing costs, because the shadow Chancellor and the former shadow Work and Pensions Minister said that that's how it was going to be based. Now, we all know in this region that we do not fare well when it comes to housing costs. And any regional cap to be introduced should be resisted by all members of this council wherever possible.
Okay, I think there was a question at the beginning there, and I won't go into the amount of harm that the SNP cuts to local councils is causing and contributing. Gavin.
As a reduction in the block grant.
I think there's more to it than that, but as I said, this isn't a political forum. We're actually trying to achieve something here, which is very, very important. We're trying to mitigate the anti-poverty, and I don't think it's a place for political posturing.
I think that it's an excellent question about how do we know where they are, but actually, as we've already said, we actually have lots of information in different places, and I'll give you some examples, members, that our work in social work, particularly with families, has looked at the financial assessment of almost everybody over the age of 65 who's taking a social work service. Our children and families work, and particularly work through the courts and care, has got financial assessments behind it. Our work around the bedroom tax has done considerable amounts of understanding the economics. The health service have got details on the impacts of poverty on individuals, if we bring that to bear, but also the number of people applying fuel poverty through our power companies. That information is also available through a different source. So we probably will be able to map a good, in excess of, I would say, 95% of our most vulnerable. It's the last 5%. But actually also the other thing about this strategy, it doesn't sit in isolation. This isn't just about an old-fashioned 1980s approach to dealing with anti-poverty. It must connect into our employability strategy and an economy. The best way to deal with poverty is to raise the economy, create jobs and sustain, as well as deal with the most vulnerable. So I'm pretty sure that using the skills of the academics and the observatory, we can pull together that data in such a way that it makes sense to members and the public. Because, we having looked at some of the initial anti-poverty in Scotland, they're very one-dimensional. We haven't come across one that really has that holistic approach through all the levers available to public partners to deal with it. So what we're trying to develop using the universities and the observatory is something comprehensive. So every policy decision the council takes refers to this as the guiding document. That's why we're taking time to get it right. If I could have taken one off the shelf, I would have and brought it to members. But there isn't one that gives us that connectivity across everything that we do. And since our number one priority is to deal with our most vulnerable, that's what this should be about. So that's why it's a reasoned, paced piece of work. But we will need member input to actually identify what the data, the core data you will need to take that decision. So that's why we will engage.
Okay, Rob.
Thanks, Leader. Following on from Gavin's point then, based on the information that we're gathering through the very interesting work the Crichton Observatory is doing, and I've read the baseline study for the economic development strategy, which is very, very useful. How can we take that data and the other sorts of data that we have already amassed so that we can make sure that, while admittedly it would be based on best guess, we can assess the possible impacts of changes such as Councillor McClung has referred to, specifically issues such as a regional welfare cap?
There are two aspects to that, if I can. First of all, the Scrutiny and Performance Committee has agreed to undertake a review to look at the effectiveness of some of our interventions into deprivation. And so that piece of work will be ongoing while we're developing the policy. But there's a lot of national work goes on about effective interventions, about what works. And that will certainly be brought to the discussions as we go through the stages.
I've had a discussion with the Vice Principal at University of the West Coast, and they're very keen to work with us on some postgraduate work around modelling impact on a rural economy, using their skin. It's one of the advantages of having them on site at the Crichton, that actually this is what they see what the impact of welfare reform around the cities was much easier than the rural. So they're willing to discuss as part of this project some postgraduate work and the focusing of that to identify modelling in the what-if scenarios because the welfare reform will develop over the next 2 to 3 years anyway. So therefore that's again, so what we're not looking is the typical that we'll know the answers. It's the fact that I think we need some real academic rigour for members around this, and that's why these discussions with Glasgow University of the West of Scotland are really important in providing members with that clear evidence base to take the decisions.
Okay, can we go to the recommendations? We've considered, which is at 2.1, can you agree 2.2 and 2.3? Agreed, thank you. Sorry, Ian.
It's not a political point at all. It just says, how do elected members actually get involved? It's there within, it's 3.12.8 and it's further on in other paragraphs, but it's not explicit. It doesn't say how, I mean, because like I said, the strategic partnership we have, my group hasn't got any members on that, we don't have any remit whatsoever. There's the only real remit we've got is through full council and chances like this, but there's other organisations and groups out there we don't have any influence, or we didn't get a chance to hear up or pick up on what's going on at all. As far as I'm aware, if we do, it certainly hasn't been made aware to us. So how do we pick up with that?
I think that perhaps for members, if Lorna returns for leave, I ask her to prepare an engagement strategy, just a simple timeline, a project plan about engagement of how members and other bodies can be involved in the construction of it to give clarity to members. So I'll ask for that to be circulated during the recess to members so that we can consult on it before we agree the final place.
Okay, can we agree? Okay. If we move on to item 13, this is the unacceptable actions policy. Council is committed to operating openly and transparently, and this requires us to deal fairly, consistently and appropriately with all our service users. Unfortunately, in a small number of cases, there are occasions when the actions of individuals become unacceptable, and while the Council is committed to ensuring that customers are heard, understood and respected, staff members have the same rights. It's accepted that there may be occasions when an individual is forceful, determined, even angry, and this is not considered to be unacceptable. What is considered to be unacceptable, however, is the use of aggressive and abusive behaviour, placing unreasonable demands, or being unreasonably persistent when an answer is not to their satisfaction. The Council requires, therefore, to have a policy which sets out what is deemed to be unacceptable and how the Council will react, not only for the guidance of officers but also the public. You'll see that the Council has had such a policy in place since 2006, and the current document sets out an updated policy based on lessons learned. I've heard that before, but this policy will be updated every 12 months, and any action taken in terms of the policy will be subject of a report to committee. Do members, we've got Judith's Paul here, do members have any questions for Judith?
No questions. I think it's just a really good report. I think we should accept it. Questions are not there. The fact that it's a 6-month initial review, then we'll look at it thereafter annually. I think we can keep a close eye on this and see how effective it is. That's the important part for myself, Leader.
Jane?
Sorry, it's a daft lassie question, but we've got our own code of conduct. Does this apply to members as well?
No. The members' code of conduct is governed by different legislation. If a member is being abused by the member of the public, yes, it would apply to a member. But you need to come through and speak with the officers and say, this particular member of the public is being abusive and is obstructing me in doing my work as a councillor, then we'd certainly look at that.
Can I approve? Okay. Just stabbed myself in the eye with my pen. Acceptable action on that. Okay, thanks, Judith. Thanks very much. Okay. Item 14, which is the community asset transfer process. As members are aware, we have a well-tried and tested disposal policy in relation to property and land. This includes the ability for the council to transfer property to a community organisation, quite often at a nominal sum. What the proposed community asset transfer process does is to provide a framework for the transfer of land and buildings to community groups. This provides guidance for officers and groups to make sure that the process is applied consistently and fairly, and it does not result in the council having to provide continuing revenue funding for a building which it has already declared surplus to requirements. It also sets out a timeline for the transfer process and ensures that there is a member scrutiny at area committee and ward level in relation to individual transfers. There is a useful flowchart that's in Appendix 1 to the document, and it shows the level of officer input there will be to assist community groups in their aspirations. Sorry, I notice you weren't Richard. We've got Karen here to answer questions. Members? Alistair?
Thanks very much, sir. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's a welcome step forward to produce this process, or to reduce it to writing in a codified form. Leader, my question would basically be how can we assure ourselves that the involvement of elected members on a ward basis, for which I'm totally supportive of the record, Chair, meets all the governance criteria? That's just a wee query in that regard, sir, to ensure that, you know, what we do have involving elected members at ward level is governance proofed.
I'll ask Alex for governance.
We will ensure that happens, sir. Obviously, officers will consult with members at a local ward level in the event that there is any disparity or dispute or disagreement about it. We'll take it to the area committee. The area committee will be the governing body. What we will do with local members will be on a relatively informal basis. Any official decisions will be taken by the area committee.
Thanks, Leader. That's helpful.
Okay, Sean.
Yeah, again, like Alistair, welcome the improvement in the this report and the improvement in the process and how it dovetails in with the disposal through area committee. I just wondered though that I've read through the process, etc. When it talks about stage 1 application, stage 2 application, etc., is there official forms that community groups have to actually fill in, or is it a letter of intent, or is there forms that have been produced that will be made available? I just thought they might have been incorporated within the report.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Marshall, yes, there are pro formas set out for use by community groups, which sets out each criteria that we require, which works in line with the documents that are in front of you today.
Okay, can we agree with the recommendation? Thank you. Move on to item 15. This is the Bargrennan Public Hall, Modern Bridge of Cree and Stewart, and it's a report by the Director Chief Executive Service. Our Council has a well-established policy whereby receipts for the sale of capital assets form part of the capital investment strategy, and this means that the receipt forms part of the capital programme. In 2010, before this policy was adopted, Wigton Area Committee agreed to recommend that a proportion of the capital receipts from the sale of the hall, which generated income of £56,000, should be given to the community of Glentrool to assist with a community project. There has been a considerable amount of work undertaken with the community of Glentrool and Bargrennan to establish a trust which wishes to upgrade the former Glentrool School as a community facility, and the trust aspirations are set out in the paragraph 3.9 of the report. While the Council wishes to support such community initiatives, the Council had to recently write off a shortfall in its budgetary projected receipts from the sale of capital assets, and it's therefore been recommended that the capital receipt be retained as a contribution towards the funding of the capital investment strategy. This does not mean that to say that the Council will not continue to support Glentroe or Bargrennan Trust, and officers will continue to work with the Trust to source funding and produce its business plan. Likewise, the current lease and management arrangements between the Council and the Trust to the former school is allowing the Trust to make use of the facility. I hope that members will agree with me that officers should press on with supporting the Trust and providing a paper to the CCS committee for further consideration. If members have any questions, either Alex or Louise will clarify any issues. Alistair?
Well, I certainly do have questions, sir. And the first question would be, to the extent that, why is this report being brought forward at this moment in time? Because I find that intriguing, Leader, because the blunt fact of the matter is that we have no application before this Council, to the best of my knowledge, for a contribution from that selling price, because there is no finalised business plan which has been agreed on behalf of the Glentroe and Bargrennan Trust to allow consideration of this type to take place, sir. And let me say for the record, Leader, that my two Mid-Galloway colleagues and I had a robust meeting with representatives of the Trust on Wednesday morning of this week, and that point was made clearly and unequivocally to them, because unfortunately there have been divergences of opinion in this community over the last several years, and the result is that this process has been held up probably in excess of a year, and that point was made to community representatives, and it was also pointed out, Leader, that we really felt that that was not appropriate. So that's the first point I would make, sir. Second point is that I would remind you, Leader, that the Glentroe community has very definitely played its part, as it were, in the development of the Council's concept of fewer but better community facilities. Bargrennan Hall has now been sold, sir. The school, what was formerly the school, is no longer a school. It's now a community facility and has been transferred from education to CCS service. Now, looking for the positives in the report, and there are positives, let me be quite clear about that. If you go to paragraph 3.14, Leader, it does, as you've already said, sir, make reference to the fact that officers will continue to support the Trust in its work to achieve the proposals in its business plan, such as those included in paragraph 3.9 of the report. These proposals, Leader, are by no means exhaustive, and some of us would argue, in fact, that they don't even address some of the most important aspects, because this community is uniquely placed to benefit, as it were, from taking forward the designations, the Biosphere and the Dark Skies Park designations, which impact on this part of the region. So, to that extent, as I say, I find that reassuring. I also find it reassuring, Leader, that you've already referred to the fact that this issue should be submitted, as it were, to the CCS committee, and they should be asked, as it were, or there should be a report produced for them asking how the Council can best, as it were, support the options available to the Trust, and indeed to make a positive contribution to taking these proposals forward. But all that, Leader, is predicated on the finalisation of the Trust's business plan. And as I say, we're not as yet there. Now, I would hope, sir, that that objective will be achieved in early course. As I've said, it was made clear on Wednesday of this week to the Trust representatives it was imperative that that piece of work was concluded. The gentleman who is working with the Trust to achieve that objective, well experienced, well able individual, took the point entirely. So I would hope, Leader, that that's the first thing that will be done, and will be done in short order. Thereafter, as I've said, I agree entirely. I find your suggestion helpful that we take the matter to the CCS committee. And I would hope at that stage, so that that includes the possibility, as it were, of some form of financial assistance to assist the Trust in meeting its objectives. Now, I'm not really fussed, being a pragmatist, I'm not really fussed where we get this from, whether it's internally from the Council, externally from other organisations, or indeed it's a combination of both. I think it's imperative, though, Leader, that we do, in fact, get, if necessary, the appropriate degree of financial assistance at that time. And to that extent, I wonder, but I will not move at this moment in time, I wonder, in fact, if this report should not, or the recommendation in this report should not, in fact, be deferred. But I'll wait and hear what colleagues have to say on it. But in the meantime, sir, I think I agree entirely. I think it's correct that we should push on, get the business plan completed as a matter of urgency, take it to the now parent committee, CCS committee, with a view, in fact, to getting all the assistance which can legitimately be expected, with a view to getting this trust, as it were, really to operate and benefit from these designations I've already alluded to, apart from anything else. I'm grateful to you, sir, for allowing me to go on at such length. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. Alex?
I think the question that Councillor Geddes asked was why is this report forward at the moment. The Council recently had to write off projected income of £411,000 from last year's budget because we didn't achieve sales or income from sales. I've still got £750,000 to achieve in savings in the current financial year, and it's now council policy that all income from sale of resources should come into that particular budget. That's the reason why it's come forward. Leader, if I can maybe add for Councillor Geddes' edification, we will be assisting much more closely the Trust in taking forward their proposals for the building. As Councillor Geddes is aware, there are preliminary discussions ongoing whereby we think that we may be able to source considerable amounts of revenue funding to assist that trust. It comes with strings, and I don't deny that, but it's something that we will be taking forward with them. The issue at the moment is not necessarily about the trust or how it takes its business forward. The issue relates to the fact that there is a capital receipt there which is lying and not able to be used as part of the savings proposal.
Alistair?
Thanks. I'm very grateful to you, Leader, for allowing me back. Well, let me say for the record, so I appreciate the necessity of the Council, in fact, having to produce a balanced budget for this year. I was part of that process. At the end of the day, I do also appreciate the importance of this, because and the absolute necessity for achieving the targets that we've set ourselves, challenging as they may be. But the blunt fact of the matter is that I think it's imperative that we look at ways of assisting a peripheral rural community, as it were, to achieve its objectives and, in fact, to take forward its proposals, which would confer a significant amount of added value, Leader, and benefit to that part of Dumfries and Galloway. That's where I'm coming from, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Following the decision on the 7th of October 2010 and the recommendation from Wigtown Area Committee, this small community were under the tacit assumption that money from the disposal of their former village hall would be retained in the community to transform the former primary school into a community facility. So you can understand the grief experienced in that community when they saw this paper coming forward. I accept the fact that there is indeed a shortfall in capital receipts, which requires to be addressed. However, if we look at paragraph 314, that there is a pledge of support to Glentrool and Bargrennan Trust. I would like to think that that pledge involves a bit more than advice on insulation and the use of their building, that there is a financial aspect to that pledge as well. Because without necessary finance, this group quite simply cannot take the building on. That it is essential they be given financial backing. The building offers a facility which would allow the council to pursue its biosphere and dark skies policies. It is, as far as I'm aware, the only a community facility in that part of the biosphere. So it would fit in completely with the council's plans in that respect. I feel that it's unimportant where the money comes from, as long as money at some point is forthcoming. The community did have a business plan, but the business plan was scuppered by various members of Glentrool Village, so they are currently working on a revised business plan, which hopefully will be forthcoming with precise figures in the next 3 or 4 months. So I would certainly ask for favourable consideration to be given to this community in helping them to pursue their plans for a community centre.
Can I just say before I let Governor, when I was speaking earlier, what I did say was the council, would continue to support Glentrool and Bargrennan Trust, and officers will continue to work with the trust to source funding and produce a business plan. I think there's I think there is a way forward here that, and if I can suggest a form of wording in the recommendation, and that's to retain the full amount, 56k, as a corporate receipt, and agree that Glentrool and Bargrennan Trust should submit a robust and realistic business plan to enable the CCS committee to consider this for funding from the capital plan, and also note the existing lease and management arrangements in place between the council and trust, and the ongoing support from the council for the work of the trust. So that covers the ongoing work within that. I think that covers the receipt, but also covers the on paper that we agree that about the business plan and the way forward, and it should be considered at the CCS committee for funding from the capital plan. Alistair?
I think that would be very helpful indeed, sir. As I say, we do appreciate the parameters within which we've got to operate. Equally, as I say, we're looking for some form of you can't get a guarantee, particularly in advance of the preparation or the finalisation of the business plan. That wouldn't be safe, sir, from a decision-making point of view. I accept that entirely. But as I say, it's an expression of goodwill, as it were, on the part of the council towards the trust and towards this community is really what we're looking for, on the basis that, I'm sure that, the community and ourselves as elected members, or local members, can trust the council to do the right thing once they're in a position to give proper consideration to it. That's really what we're looking for, or I'm looking for.
Okay, does everybody agree with that type of wording that I used in the recommendation? Yep, thank you, thanks. Item 16, this is appointment to outside bodies, the Dumfries Prison Visiting Committee. We're being asked to make an appointment to the Dumfries Prison Visiting Committee. The report sets out the background to committee visiting membership. It will be a short appointment, since visiting committees are about to be disestablished and replaced by prison monitors. Do I have any volunteers, or does the council need to go to the expense of advertising externally for a non-councillor volunteer for such a short period of time? And that's a plea.
I'll bail you out. Being a person of conviction, I will bail you out.
Okay, we have a volunteer. No other nominations? No? Okay then. Right. Thank you. No other business. Enjoy your break.
Thank you, Leader.